Has anyone had a celebrity suitable not for work encounter? What's your story? Story 1. I was shooting behind the scenes photos of a D-list celebrity boxing tournament in college. After a long day of witnessing the power of egos and 15 minutes of fame, the Optimum giving me Advil for my back, Curio calling me a G, and seeing Jose Canseco put on fake tattoo sleeves, I was ready for a drink. I had been talking to an absolutely beautiful ring girl, and she wanted to join me for a beer after the fights ended. We went upstairs to the bar, and she went to get us a table. I went over to the bar, and while waiting for the drinks, Ron Jeremy himself came up next to me. He said he had seen me talking to the girl all night and offered to be a wingman for me. Luckily, my confidence was already sky high for already getting the girl to come drink with me, so I politely declined and went to join her waiting at a table nearby. Story 2. I was in Stratford watching a production of Hamlet starring one of his friends. He was sitting somewhere above us, in a private section. After the applause died, I made a beeline for the door. I was starving, having had to skip the requisite pre-theater meal, and leveled the head of his entourage/bodyguard with my shoulder when he stepped out into the aisle. I still don't know if the guy was protection per se, but he was modestly big and dressed like one. Mild commotion ensues, with lots of Canadians apologizing all around. Nielsen throws a karate stance and then starts laughing. We happened to end up in the same restaurant later that evening. I hit the washroom, and as I was about to have a piss, and in strolls Nielsen. He notices me, and then, as awkwardly as possible, chooses the urinal directly next to me. Zippy starts telling me in classic Nielsen deadpan how he fired the guy 1 week away from retirement, how his kids are going to go hungry, not enough money to buy his wife clothes, which is fine because she's pretty good looking for an amputee, etc. I just kind of default into listening mode, because it was hilariously weird. After a bit he looks over at me, as drolly as possible, and says, "Kid, I'm 3/4 of a century old. This takes a while. Are you going to say something?" So I asked him about the play, and how he felt his friend had handled a couple of notoriously tricky scenes. Our conversation, peeing, was largely confined to the comic aspects of playing Hamlet, as you'd expect, but while brief, it was illuminating. Eventually, decorum allows his zip to dictate my zip. We wash our hands, still chatting, and then head back out. Outside the washroom, he extends his hand and says, rather conventionally, "Well, it was a pleasure, Vero," and impulsively, I shake it. He holds on just a little too long, and then starts grinning lewdly at me and repeats, "A pleasure, I lost it." He walks back to his table. Story 3. This wasn't me. It was my mom. My mom was on her honeymoon in Hawaii when she bumped into O.J. Simpson before he went crazy. He looked at her and asked to head to his room. She pointed at her ring finger and said, "Well, I just got married." He took her hand and put it down, looked at her and said, "That matters, why?" In the end, she called over my dad, and he took a picture of her with OJ, which is now forever in her honeymoon album. Story 4. Back in the 90s, when Jean-Claude Van Damme was the crap, a relative was at a Vegas hotel and went down to use the sauna. He was in there talking with a business partner, and in walks Van Damme. He says, "If you are who I think you are, you're Major Champ's favorite action star," and Van Damme confirmed and told him to tell me hello from him. Everyone was clouthless. Story 5. I worked my way through college as a waiter in a gourmet room in Las Vegas. I became acquainted with Florence Henderson, and she would ask to sit in my station. One evening, she had a guest, Joan Rivers, me. Henderson had a favorite wine, Peace Porter, that she always ordered. It just so happened that on our wine list, that wine was labeled as number 69. That's how she ordered it. "I'll have a bottle of 69. On this night, I approached the table, introduced myself to Ms. Rivers, and made the usual small talk. Then I asked, "So, Miss Henderson, would you like a little 69 tonight?" Oh my God, Joan Rivers went completely insane. She started screaming and yelling and demanding security to have me fired and arrested. And the whole time, Florence Henderson is trying to calm her down and explain. Long story short, the matron put me in another area. And not long after I graduated and left that job, and I never forgot that story. This happened in around 1985. Story 6. I went to a pool party in LA around 2002, and there was a guy named Michael Bubble there. I don't think anyone had heard of him at the time. I remember meeting him only because my friend made fun of him when he introduced himself by calling him Michael Goobly Moogly, which was a reference to a line in a Stickers commercial. For the rest of the night, he was known as Goobly Moogly. Later that night, I walked into the bathroom in the guest house, and he was taking a poo. I think it was about a year or two later that he became a big deal. Story 7. I was at a hotel in South Africa looking for the bathroom when I got lost and ran into Lawrence Fishburne in a hallway. I pretended like I didn't know who he was and asked if he knew where the bathroom was, like I probably would have asked anyone anyway. He was a very nice guy and walked me to the bathroom where he said, "The men's room is on the left, the women's room is on the right. The choice is yours." I laughed so hard. Story 8. When I was around 13, my cousin surprised me and took me to Leonardo DiCaprio's house. My cousin's newlywed husband was very good friends with him. This was around 15 years ago too, when Leo was in his absolute prime, and unbeknownst to him, I was completely and utterly obsessed. I'll never forget sitting on his white leather couch just waiting for him to walk into the room we were all in, and out he came with a trail of smoke behind him, high as a kite with a fat blunt in between his fingers. And I mean he was as high as Mount Everest. I didn't even recognize him due to his scruffy beard and long matted hair. Pretty funny that I was expecting him to look like Jack from the Titanic, but he could have passed as the dude. Story 9. In early 2013, a female friend and I went to an after party that Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, was DJing it after one of his concerts in Sydney. After his DJ set, we were smoking outside when Donald exited the venue through a side door. We looked over at him, and he immediately approached us and introduced himself. Right from the get-go, my friend starts flirting with him hard. He asked us if we had any stuff. We did, and he invited us back to his hotel to smoke with him. We ended up on the balcony of his hotel suite along with a couple of other guys smoking a blunt. My friend is all over him. I've never seen her try so hard to get with a guy. I could tell from pretty early on that he wasn't into it at all. He was staring off into the distance and ignoring her or responding with one-word answers. After about half an hour, he stands up and says, "I'm going to bed." My friend asks him if she should come, to which he looks her dead in the eye and says, "I honestly don't give a thing what you do," and walks off. We left soon after that. Story 10. I live in Las Vegas and often see celebrities here. One time on summer vacation while in high school in the mid-90s when I was 16 and just got my driver's license, I was at the Forum Shops at Caesar's Palace with a friend, and there was a crowd outside the Versace store, so we went over to see what was going on. Mike Tyson and his entourage were shopping inside, and they locked the doors for him. After a while, they all disappeared into the back of the store, and we realized from having had a part-time job at the mall they were headed to employee parking behind the store. We ran down the corridor next to the store and headed outside where his crew were loading up Persian rugs and shopping bags into a Range Rover, while Iron Mike was putting on a helmet and jumping onto a sport bike. My buddy and I start waving at him, and right as he makes eye contact, my friend switches from a wave to flipping him off. Mike ripped off the helmet and started shouting obscenities at us while we ran back into the mall scared to death. Story 11. David Spade is exactly the bum you'd expect him to be. He opened for Bobcat Goldthwait, and my roommate's best friend was Bobcat's brother. I'd had to go backstage after the show, and we were sitting in a circle with Bob's brother, and there was another group of people just standing off to the side. Bob came out of the shower and sat down next to me and started talking. Genuinely a good guy. Spent 20 minutes talking with him. One of the people standing off to the side was a girl on crutches. I felt bad, so I suggested that they pull up a chair and join us. To help her, I got up and pulled a chair over for her. I turned around and Spade took my seat, flipped me the bird, and told me to buzz off. The date he got tased by his bodyguard was a glorious one. Story 12. I ran into Danny McBride at the San Diego Comic-Con. I was riding the elevator alone in my hotel when it stopped on the floor of the big celebrity party going on that night. The door opens, and standing right there is Danny McBride, Jody Hill, and a few of their friends. I freaked out. I immediately yelled, "Oh my God, it's Kenny Powers." I saw plenty of celebrities that weekend, but he is the only one I saw that I fangirl out on. He was wasted. His friends were too. I asked him for a picture, even though it was a struggle to get the words out. He grabbed my phone and took a half-dozen selfies of all of us in the elevator. All I could muster, over and over, was Kenny freaking Powers. He handed me back my phone, put his hands on my shoulders, looked me in the eye, and made some joke about me trying to take a nice vacation, and not even knowing Comic-Con was going to be on that weekend. I put my hands on his waist, so we were positioned like a couple of slow dancing 8th graders, and said, one final time, "It's Kenny freaking Powers." It took me a good hour to get over the adrenaline rush, and I now love him more than ever. Story 13. I went to Miley Cyrus' 18th birthday. Was hanging out with a few friends for a car show in LA, and apparently this girl that was with us, who I hadn't met until that night, was dating Miley's brother. Turns out they were going to Miley's place for a party and asked us to drop them off. We dropped them off, and as we were driving away we decided, who cares, how many times are we gonna have a chance like this? We turned around and hit up the girl to see if she could get us in. She said sure, and we ended up partying there for a couple hours. Hadn't seen Miley all night, and next thing I know I'm in the kitchen and I look over and she's by the sink taking a smoke. At that time, she was still this perfect Christian Disney star, so it was weird seeing her smoking weed just a few feet from me. Apparently some guys nobody knew ended up sneaking into the party and grabbing a couple purses, to include Miley's, and ran off. Once that happened, they kicked everyone out and we went home. I found out later that her phone was in the purse and had a video of her smoking, which got released to the public and was the first of many things that changed everyone's image of her. Story 14. Me and my now wife were at an Irish bar in NYC. I went to the toilet, and when I walked back a guy was standing in the way watching baseball drinking whiskey. I said excuse me and he said sorry, but looked down to hide his face. Went back to Mrs. and she asked what was up. I said I've just seen Michael Keaton. I'm a huge Batman fan. She was telling me to go over and say something, but the bar was packed, and how they reacted to me I knew he wanted to chill and watch the baseball. She was badgering me for a few minutes, all while pointing and me shaking my head and saying no. As I looked over I saw he was looking at us, but he turned away quickly. My wife was facing him and still on at me saying I'm an idiot for not doing anything. She stopped talking abruptly and said as walking over I looked towards the bar and saw him get closer. He stepped in between me and my partner facing me. I turned to him. He put his whiskey on the bar, winked at me, and walked out the bar. I think he realized what she was saying and I wasn't going to do it, so he came over to show his appreciation. I've been approved by the Batman. Story 15. Las Vegas. I'm eating lunch with my mother when I spotted Wayne Brady also eating lunch with his mother. I waited until he finished eating before asking for a photograph. iPhones were still fairly new and my sweet mother had never really used one, so as Wayne Brady and I were posing for the picture, my mother kept pressing the home button to take it. I quickly pulled the camera back up and posed again. She pressed the home button again. Once more, I opened the camera app, and this time Wayne Brady nicely explained that you have to press the button on the screen for the picture. You guessed it, my mother pressed the home button again, so I thought I'd be funny and chime in with, "Is Wayne Brady gonna have to gag a bee?" No one laughed. It was Mother's Day. My mom didn't know the reference. Got the picture at least. Wayne Brady was very nice. Story 16. I was 18 and on vacation at Atlantis in the Bahamas. It was at night, and my friend and I were exploring the grounds. A big black limo pulled up near the main entrance in Vern Troyer, Mini-Me, stepped out with a beautiful woman and a few big-built bodyguards. My friend and I were like, oh my God, we gotta get a picture with him. So we asked him politely and he said yes, but only one. So my friend stood on his left, and I stood on his right, and the bodyguard took the pic, disposable camera days. While the picture was being taken, Vern had his left hand firmly planted on her bottom, and the right hand firmly planted on mine, pinching hard. I guess I can't blame him as our bottom is eye level for him. So yeah. Story 17. When I was 10, I got invited to some photo shoot with World Wrestling Federation stars. I remember having to go to the bathroom, so when I opened the door, which wasn't locked, Goldust is there taking a poop, and I'm just there staring at him in disbelief, and he's staring at me. I eventually closed the door. He finally gets out, and I go in, and he gives me this huge stare down. He was like a monster. I got a little scared, but whatever. I ended up going in, and I remember it smelling so bad. I finished up and opened the door, and who was waiting next? Stacy Keebler. Only thing I told her was, it wasn't me. It was Goldust. Story 18. Back in 2003, I worked at the Best Buy in Westwood, UCLA, store 327. It's no longer there, but we get famous people in from time to time. Jessica Alba bought 2 Xboxes for me, told my manager I was great. Christina Aguilera came in a few times. Anyhow, this was back in my smoking prime, and basically only California had incredible strains like OG Kush. One night, we're closing up and 2 guys are playing Madden on the store Xbox or PlayStation, and it was Snoop and Method Man. I told them we were closing, and they were very friendly and polite, so I said, hey guys, I'll be outside in like 10 minutes. If you want, I got some OG Kush if you want to smoke. I have an Oldsmobile Alero, gold color, in the lot. They leave, I walk out, and sure enough, Snoop and Method Man are parked next to my car. So I got high with 2 legends and went home. Story 19. I almost spilled hot soup right on Clint Eastwood's head. I was an extra in Jersey Boys and went into the wrong trailer to eat. pushed the door open, and stood there looking at all the people not in period costume, and realized I needed to leave. Looked down, and a familiar-shaped head was right below my plate of hot food and bowl of hot stuff. They shouldn't let people sit that close to the door. It's dangerous. Story 20. My sister was stopped by Jonah Hill one Saturday night, drunk as hell. He proposed to her and said he loved her, then fell on his face. One of his security guards had to pick him up off his feet. That's a wrap for this video. Make sure to leave your relatable story down in the comments. I would love to make a video on them. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.